In this video we're going to talk about general bird anatomy. It's important to understand this before moving on to individual species because all birds have certain anatomical features in common. The first one to understand is the axis of symmetry, and I'm sure you've probably noticed this one before. Birds tend to be symmetrical, and you can see that I've drawn this line down the center of the pelican's body. That is the axis of symmetry, so that everything on this side of the body will be mirrored on this side of the body, equal distance away from that central axis of symmetry line. So the breast, for example, will be symmetrical on the other side of the body. We can't actually see it there. And the wing will be symmetrical on both sides. And they're equal distance away from this axis of symmetry, which I've drawn going down the middle of the pelican's body. Now, another aspect that's quite obvious about birds' anatomy is that they have feathers. But some people get a bit confused because they see some birds like emus where the feathers look almost like fur. But all birds do in fact have feathers. Sometimes the feathers can be quite fur-like in appearance, but they do always have feathers. And later in the course we'll learn a little bit more about how to render them. So if we want to understand some other aspects about bird anatomy that all birds tend to have in common, we want to look at their skeleton. And what I have here is an illustration of a chicken skeleton. Now, the first thing you need to understand about bird anatomy is that everything about their anatomy is designed to be as light as possible so that they can take to the air. Birds tend to have very thin bones, and unlike our bones, they have some hollow areas. And in those hollow areas, they actually have an internal webbing structure, so it's not completely hollow. It's a little bit like honeycomb, if you can imagine, but it doesn't have quite the same structure. And what you do find inside these hollow bones is this structure designed to keep the bones as strong as possible without adding much weight. You'll also notice that birds tend to have beaks. They don't have heavy jaws like mammals, and they don't have teeth like us. Again, designed to keep them as lightweight as possible. Obviously, all birds have wings, as you can see demonstrated here in this chicken skeleton. And whether or not birds can actually fly, they all have wings. So an emu or an ostrich, for example, which cannot fly, does still have wings. Now, as adaptations to being able to fly, birds also have a few distinct bones around here. This here is the wishbone, which you'd probably recognise if you saw it from a different angle. The wishbone is actually the same as our collarbones, and they've just been fused together right at this point over here into a single bone. Birds also have a coracoid bone, which is in the shoulder. Most mammals don't have that. We don't have that bone, but birds do. You're not really going to need to know about that for the outside of the bird's body, though. They have a keel here. This bone is called the keel, and it is located in front of the ribs. The idea of this bone here is to offer a huge surface area for the chest muscles to attach to. And the reason why birds have that is because they require these enormous chest muscles in order to be able to fly. Those chest muscles help power the wings. Now, a bird's leg has this distinctive shape to it. You can't always see this shape from the outside. It tends to be covered by feathers, especially this upper area here. But the shape is not that different from the shape that you find in a horse or a cat or a dog, where you've got the hip up here, you've got the knee over here, this is the ankle, and then this is the equivalent of our foot with the toes actually touching the ground. Now, if you take a look at the top of the spine, you'll see it connects at the back of the skull. In humans, the spine connects at the bottom of the skull, but birds, like most animals with skeletons, it connects at the back, and that will affect the way that you draw them. One last thing to know about bird anatomy is that they rarely get beyond a certain size. Once they are too large, they can no longer fly. Now, obviously, there are some birds like ostriches and emus which cannot fly. They're too big to fly. Penguins can't fly either because they're more adapted to a life in the water. But most birds have to be able to fly, and to do this they need to be small enough and light enough to take to the air. So body size in birds tend to vary from the very small to about the medium size. You don't get a lot of large body birds. And that pretty much covers what you need to know about general bird anatomy. We'll take a more detailed look at the feet and the wings, so you can just understand them a little bit better before we move on to specific species.